Hey, good morning, Pete, North Las Vegas. My H&R COTS lower receiver showed up from Palmetto State Armory. Some of you might be wondering what the heck is a COTS? And I honestly did not know until a few months ago what a COTS was. So we'll get into that real quick. And then I'm going to backtrack a little bit on the upper. And then we're going to drill down to the subatomic level on the receiver. So let's talk about what COTS is. Okay, so this is the basic general description of what COTS is. It stands for Commercial Off the Shelf. It was a program started by, or signed off on by William Perry, who was the Secretary of Defense in 1994. But COTS also goes beyond the defense and military contracting. It's a program that was created for all government procurement and contracting to allow procurement of things that were very difficult to get other than a contract and standard procurement procedures back then. So it was a way for the military to kind of get what they wanted from the commercial market and kind of get around some of the red tape as far as purchasing goes. So that's kind of the general quick description. If you really want to get down into the weeds, you can go to the Federal Acquisition Regulations, and it'll drill down and tell you exactly what commercial off-the-shelf is all about. You'll see down at the bottom left there, comorgan.com. There's a 1 or 2 page write-up on that gives a little bit more definition as to exactly what COTS is. Okay, so this particular lower receiver that's marketed by H&R and Palmetto State Armory is marketed as Special Forces COTS, which might be a little bit of a stretch. H&R, as far as I know, never actually made an A2 version of the M16 that I know of. I could be wrong about that. I'm not a big historian on the AR platform. But as far as I know, H&R never made A2s for the military. Okay, so the main difference between the M16A2 lower receiver from H&R and the M16A2 COTS version is you won't see property of U.S. government on the receiver. So they deleted that. Another difference is on the M16A2 H&R version through Palmetto State Armory, there's no spacing between the M16 and A2. So it's going to say property of U.S. government and then M16A2 with no space. And then the other primary difference between the M16A2 version is this is marked burst, not auto. So on the COTS version, you get auto. So that's the primary differences. And like I said, I don't know enough about H&R's history, the A2s, to say whether this was actually something that could be procured through the COTS system. I don't think so. I think it's more of a kind of a marketing gimmick through Palmetto State Armory to call this Special Forces COTS. But anyway, I could be wrong about some of this information, but that's the primary difference between what Palmetto State Armory is selling on their M16A2 version lower receiver versus their COTS version. Okay, so quick note on packaging before we backtrack a little bit to the upper. You can see the upper came in a nice foam cutout, bubble wrapped, very well protected. The lower just showed up wrapped in bubble wrap and in this box. So why the extra care on the upper and just bubble wrap it and throw it in a box on the lower? I don't know. Okay, so on the very first video of this build series, video 1, we were showcasing the upper here, and I talked about how H&R and Palmetto had left the flashing. They machined it down, they got it smoothed out, so it's not really rough, but they kind of left some of it exposed. And they did that on the front and the back of the receiver. And they did the same thing on the lower, which we're going to get to. I'm just backtracking a little bit because Nodak Spud came in to my channel and left a comment, which is kind of surprising. I run a pretty small channel and it usually flies well under the radar. But Nodak Spud came in and he had said that they decided to carry over the flashing from their retro A1 series to the A2 series. And not sure what all the reasoning was. He did say that completely getting rid of the flashing is not easy to do. He said that when they use CNC machines to do it, it doesn't look quite right. And so they just decided to carry it over from their A1 retro series. And that was kind of basically his explanation. But I was kind of surprised that Nodak Spud actually came in and left a comment about that. Okay, so let's get on with the lower, which is what this video is really supposed to be about. Okay, so cosmetically, aesthetically, this receiver showed up with not a scratch or a ding on it, so I was very surprised. I don't care if you see my serial number. What are you going to do with it? I know a lot of people cover it up for some reason. A little bit of paranoia going on there, or maybe they're the smart ones. But anyway, like I said, this thing showed up. The finish is very nice and even everywhere. And as far as I could tell, everything seems to be in spec with what I've checked so far, and we're going to cover some of that in this video also. But like I said, not a speck or a scratch on it. They did carry over the flashing, same as they did on the upper. And when I first saw it, when I first got it, I wasn't sure how I felt about it, but actually it's kind of getting to where it doesn't bother me at all. It's growing on me, like it was my reply to Nodak Spud. So anyway, we're going to start putting some of this together. I won't be able to show a whole lot because you know who's BS. But it's a high shelf. There is no hole drilled for a tensioning lug. So if there's going to be any slop on this, we'll probably have to, as soon as I find it, I dug all this stuff out a minute ago. So if there is any slop at all, we'll just use an AccuWedge. But let's find out. Okay, so these are Aero Precision pins, pivot and takedown. And they come in like right on the money. 0.248 is nominal. If you have a receiver to where these bores are maybe a little bit on the large side, or even if they're a little bit too small, your pins are really tight. There's quite a few companies out there that will sell oversized pins and also undersized pins if your bores are too tight. JP Rifles or JP Enterprises is one of them, one of the companies. And they sell 3 different sizes. They sell 0.247, 0.248, and 0.249. So if you need your pivot and takedown pins to, if they're too tight or too loose on your receivers, that might be the fix for you. So let's get these two halves put together. We'll just slide these in without the springs and detents and see what kind of slop we have. Okay, so you can see the length of the Aero Precision pins is a little bit longer. CMMG does the same thing. CMMG dimples theirs also, where these arrows are machined flat. But I got both the pivot and takedown in there, and there is like hardly any movement at all. I mean, I can barely feel anything. So very happy with the Aero Precision pins and the H&R upper and receiver fitment. So all that turned out really nice. Okay, so the Aero Precision lower parts kit comes with a 440 set screw. And that's because the Aero Precision lower receivers come threaded for your takedown. And the H&R is not threaded. At least I don't think it is. No, it's not. So we're gonna tap that with this 440 and then use a set screw to capture the spring and the detent for the rear takedown. And I generally don't quite cut off the same amount on the spring. As far as the set screw length, I'll usually only cut about a coil off. That seems to work, but I may end up having to cut 2 coils off. In some of my older builds, I didn't trim the spring at all. It went in there and it did not bind up and didn't cause any issues with the pin, but I'm probably going to trim at least a coil off that spring. So I'm going to tap this off camera because we don't want the powers to be on this platform to get themselves worked up into a frenzy. So let me get that tapped. We'll get the rear takedown pin installed, and plenty of videos on how to get that in there. Also, I'm going to show you something in the Marine Corps manual where they show you how to build a tool to get that rear pin out without disassembly of an A2 or a carbine buttstock plate that normally captures that spring. So we'll take a quick clip of that real quick. Okay, so this comes out of the Marine Corps manual, and they show you how to make a tool out of an Allen wrench or socket key or socket head screw key. And that allows you to release the detent and spring to get that rear takedown pin out without disassembling the back end of the rifle if this was assembled. Okay, so if you're not used to tapping holes, I use a little bit of grease. You can use oil, whatever you want. And that just kind of captures the chips and keeps them in the flutes away from the cutting edges. You want to try to get this thing as straight as you possibly can, but if you're off a little bit, by the time you get a few threads cut, it'll kind of straighten itself out. And then about every turn I put on it, I'll back it off like a quarter turn, and that also helps to clear the chips out and get a nice set of threads in there. And I only cut enough threads. You know, I might give it an extra thread or two for the set screw just to make sure that when I get the set screw in here, it goes flush, but I don't cut any more threads than I need to. Okay, sorry about the shaky camera work. I just test fit the set screw, and I got to go about another couple of threads. So like I said, I just try to thread enough to make sure I can get that thing flush. Okay, so I'm going to trim about a coil and a half off, maybe 2 coils, I don't know. Depends on how I feel. And we'll get this rear takedown pin installed. Okay, we're good. It's a little tricky getting that spring compressed and that set screw started. You might want to plan on launching parts. If I get really paranoid about it, I'll set up like an empty box behind it, so that way if I launch parts, at least maybe they'll get captured by the box or a towel or something. But anyway, I managed to get in there without too much trouble. Okay, so we got the pivot takedown pins installed, the 440 set screw. I think we'll put this thing in next, and then we'll get a magazine and see if it locks in and out like it's supposed to. So this is the one area I always seem to end up with a little bit of shiny metal down here on the receiver. I do have the right tools. I do have the flat-sided pin starters, roll pin, to get that roll pin in, but it seems like no matter how careful I am, I always get a little bit of shiny in there. But if we do, I have some aluminum black from Birchwood Casey that will take care of that issue. Okay, no issues. Everything went in like it's supposed to and appears to drop free, so we're good there. Some of you might recognize this. This is a OK Industries, and this is their enhanced version. They're not being made anymore. Might still be able to find these out there somewhere, but that's too bad. They shut their doors. All right, I managed to get it in there this time with no shiny, not even on the pin. I just really gently tapped the pin, so it didn't even take the parkerizing or finish off the roll pin. So no shiny anywhere. I stopped before I went fully flush on this side, or tried to split the difference. So I've managed to do this in the past a couple of times, but most of the time there at the bottom radius, I'll usually get a little bit of shiny aluminum. Okay, so in the past, I haven't been a big, huge fan of two-stage, but I thought, seeing how this is SOP mod certified, maybe we'll give it a second chance. So anyway, we're going to go with two-stage on this build, and I may grow into it. Okay, so this is my first Geisley install, and I've built a ton of ARs, and I'm late to the party on the Geisley trigger. But I did want to say that this slave pin that he gives you to get the trigger and the disconnector and the receiver all lined up, that came in really handy, and I'll just leave it at that. Okay, so like I said, for those of you that have installed Geisleys before, this part of the video is not for you. You already know. On your safety selector, you can put it in before or after you put your trigger in. Now, once you get your hammer in, now it's going to be almost impossible to get your selector in. But so long as all you have is the trigger installed, you can put this in first or last, doesn't matter. But like I said, once you get the hammer installed, now you don't have that option. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and install the pistol grip. And we have the selector in there, the detent's being held in there with some grease. And I have my choice of what I'm going to use to put the pistol grip on. This is black oxide, it's not nitride, so this will rust. Not using that. So now we're down to this. Standard socket head or the socket button head. I have decided that I'm going to be using the button head because it engages the internal locking washer the best. And you don't really have to use a lock washer on your pistol grip. If you put it on dry or you use a little bit of Loctite, but I put mine in with grease because I'm always trying to prevent dissimilar metal corrosion. Not that it's likely to happen, but I always try to do stuff to prevent it. So I grease the threads, so that's why I use a lock washer. So we'll show you how the washer fits one versus the other. Okay, so you can see how the head engages the washer on the standard socket head. Not quite as good as I like it. Okay, and now you can see that the button head captures that internal lock washer much better. So that's why I'm going with this. Also, I've already threaded this into the receiver to make sure that H&R didn't forget to thread all the way through, and then I'm going to have the proper thread engagement to get this thing snugged up. So we'll get it on, put the hammer on. Okay, so we got the pistol grip on, got the trigger group completely installed. We did our safety checks. Check the reset. Reset's good. So everything, that spring is not going to have any problem lighting off a primer. Anyway, yeah, so we got this all put together. This is as far as I can go with the lower today. I don't have all the parts. I had a A2 buttstock assembly back ordered with Wyndham Weaponry. And for those of you that don't know, Wyndham Weaponry has gone out of business. They closed their doors last Tuesday. They gave everybody, I think, until 11 p.m. on Tuesday night to get their orders in. They said that those would still be filled if stuff was in stock. But Wyndham Weaponry is no longer in business. And that's kind of, I don't know. They didn't maybe make the best rifles, but they weren't bad. They were pretty good. So I hate to see them go under. So anyway, we'll do one last set of close-ups on this thing, and then that'll be it for today. I have some things to do to finish up the upper receiver, and my barrel is still out up in Utah somewhere. So I called them yesterday. They said they should be getting it done this week and shipped back to me. So hopefully next week we'll get the upper and the barrel put together and show you what this complete rifle looks like. Oh yeah, I decided to go with the Bastion trigger guard. I know it's not clone correct for a Colt HBAR, but I mean, it doesn't look bad. Okay, so one last thing I wanted to talk about. I'm not going to be using this AccuWedge because the upper and lower fitment is good enough to where I'm not worried about it. It's pretty snug. But if you were to use an AccuWedge, you can see how, because this is a high shelf, that the tab is sticking up where your bolt carrier is going to come. So your bolt carrier is going to slide back here, and if you don't trim that off, you know, it's going to hit, it can bind up a little bit, it can break off and maybe jam up the inside of your rifle. In this particular case, if I was going to use this, I would also have to trim a little bit off the bottom because I tried to close it up and it was a little too tight. But like I said, I'm not going to be using this. I just wanted to show you that if you do use an AccuWedge, to kind of be careful how your fitment goes. Okay, well, this is as far as we can go with it today. Besides wobble between the upper and lower receiver, which this one virtually has none, some of my other pet peeves are these castings between the upper and the lower right here. I always like to see these line up as well as they can. This one's pretty good. It's not off by much, maybe a little bit. Another one is your bolt catch boss area here, and having those symmetrical. You'll see a lot of receivers where this will be a lot thicker and this will be a lot thinner, or vice versa. And this is pretty even. If you look at it from the side, it looks like it's a little uneven, but that's just because of the shadowing, and they radiused this a little bit more, but they're the same thickness. So that's kind of mainly what I'm looking for. But anyway, upper and lower finish matches. All the pins, everything dimensionally, everything's good. I managed to get this put together without a single scratch, dent, or ding. All right, well, as soon as I get my barrel and an A2 stock, we'll finish up this build. Pete, North Las Vegas. Over and out.